Right, guys, nearly there, nearly there. All right, for Germany, first time I'm making the Germany videos. I'm just gonna sorry, I'm fiddling around with the camera. Predominantly gonna focus on three potential topics that could show up in the GCSE. Again, as always, don't try and focus on predictions. But I feel like this content could be most useful. So, again, hopefully you do find it useful and you are answering questions as you watch and you're recording your notes as you go. I'll try and link it to questions as much as I can, but remember the questions on Germany are explain, inference, you've got your source question, and then you've got your interpretation questions, which are threefold, okay? So, dictatorship, one of the most important ones, one that hasn't come up in a long time. So we need to be on top of everything to do with dictatorship. That's a good graphic to kind of highlight the stages to dictatorship. So we're going to talk through that in this session. Okay, now because the sessions I'm going to do on Germany aren't sequenced the way I did Elizabeth and American West, I can't assume on knowledge, although if you've done your revision you should know all this. But Hitler had become Chancellor in January 1933, right? And he's got his foot in the door now. But he's not in sole power, remember, because this is a democracy. The Weimar Republic is still technically alive, but Hitler's going to really make short work of that in the space of a year and a half. Okay, and that's really what this story is about, how Hitler turns the Weimar Republic into a Nazi dictatorship. And he's going to do this by 1934, where he becomes Führer. So that's the end goal here. Okay, so his strength. Now, remember, just to recap his chancellorship, when he became chancellor, he kind of got the popular support following the Wall Street crash, and he's promising the people a lot of different things. And with this, he is able to get his foot in the door in terms of the Reichstag until von Papen and Hindenburg basically underestimate him, believing they can use him as a puppet. So again, Hitler's still in a weak position. The Nazis, their support had actually been falling. He needed more than 50% to take control, because remember, this is proportional representation. He could be sacked by Hindenburg. Hindenburg is one of the main guys around who is far more powerful than Hitler. So whenever Hindenburg's around, Hitler is never in true control. Only two other Nazis were actually in the government, and Hindenburg and Papen believed they could use him as this puppet. And then this happens. So, just so you got your dates right, remember, Hitler is Chancellor in January 1933. The Nazis are the most popular party in Germany, but they only had 40% of the vote, which did not allow them to make decisions by themselves as they kind of wanted. And Hitler's power was kind of limited because of the Weimar Constitution. It controlled what Hitler could do as Chancellor, and Hindenburg really had all the power. That's what Hitler wants. Hitler wants kind of the power Hindenburg wields. And Hitler's actually only got two Nazis in his cabinet. So, again, not an ideal situation and quite weak. So it is in put it in perspective, what Hitler goes on to do is quite remarkable in terms of completely changing this democracy. Hitler knew there was an election coming up in March, and he knew he's doing what they were doing at the moment. Their party weren't going to gain more votes, so something drastic had to happen. And this is the Reichstag fire on the 27th of February 1933. Make sure you're writing those dates down. You need to know your dates on this one, guys. So, what happened? Well, you should know the Reichstag it's kind of like the Parliament in the UK. So it's where all decisions are made. It's like the symbol of democracy in Germany. Well, on the 27th of February 1933, the Reichstag was set on fire, and the Nazis arrested a Dutch communist called Marinus van der Lubbe, who was found at the scene with communist propaganda stuffed in his trousers. Now, the Nazis claimed the communists were about to stage a takeover, and very importantly, they arrested 4,000 communists that night. And it happened just a week before the election. So, very useful for the Nazis to go and eliminate their main rivals just before an election. Now, Marinus van der Lubbe, so he was caught on the site with matches, firelighters full of communist propaganda. He confessed and was put on trial with 4 others, though he claimed he was acting alone. The other 4 were found not guilty, whereas Marinus van der Lubbe was executed. So, let's have a look at this quote. This is Goering speaking while editing a draft press report of the Reichstag fire. And now he crosses out the 1 CWT of incendiary material, that's explosive devices, and changed it to 1,000, even when told that one single arsonist could not carry such a weight. So 1 CWT is equivalent to 50 kilograms. So think about how Goering here is really riling up the crowd. He's really riling people up against the communists. And he says that's sheer rubbish. It may be a good police report, but it's not the kind of message I have in mind. Why mention a single man? There were 10 or 20 men. The whole thing was a signal for a communist uprising. Look what the Nazis are doing with this. They're kind of riling up the people, that fear of communism. Remember, after the Wall Street crash, the Nazis won a lot of support with this fear of communism, and the Nazis promising to protect businesses, farmers from the communists. So again, this is really playing into the hands of Hitler. And this is Hitler on the evening after the fire. Now we'll show them. The German people have been soft too long. Every communist official must be shot. All communist deputies must be hanged this very night. All friends of the communists must be locked up. And that goes for the Social Democrats as well. So, when this fire happened, the Nazis, well, Hitler in particular, he had a list of the leading communists ready to go. And he goes to Hindenburg straight away, wanting to arrest them. And this emergency decree is very important. Now, be careful, guys. The emergency decree is not the enabling act. This is its own kind of decree. Now, Hitler persuades Hindenburg to sign it, and it's actually called the Decree for the Protection of the People and State. And what it allows Hitler to do, you can see the order there itself, restrict the rights of personal freedom, freedom of opinion, expression, freedom of the press, freedom to organize and assemble, the privacy of postal, telegraphic, telephonic communications, warrants for house searches, and orders of confiscation, as well as restrictions on property, are also permissible beyond those limits otherwise prescribed. Very much Hitler is straight away limiting people's freedoms. Look how quickly this is happening. This is less than a month after he's become Chancellor, and he's already passing something like this. It gives him an immense power. It allows him to shut down the communists straight away, arresting people without trial. Personal liberties banned. Nazis banned meetings held by their political opponents. They're already attacking opposition. They're already attacking democracy, right? That's why this is so significant. And so this is just a little bit more on the emergency decree. Again, the police now had emergency powers, and Hitler's got control of the police to search houses, confiscate property, and detain people without trial. Death penalty for a wide range of crimes. Meetings could be banned, newspapers closed, political opponents arrested, state radio stations seized. Hitler is moving on his enemies straight away, and it would stay in place for 12 years. This is already Hitler trying to form a dictatorship immediately. That's why the Reichstag fire is so significant. It eliminates the communists and allows them to push through the emergency decree. Okay? Make sure you know those two things. Very important. If you know anything about the Reichstag fire, know the impact it has. Okay? Right, the March elections. Now, Hitler, the Nazis win 288 seats. Despite imprisoning socialists and communists and having this advantage now of media control by eliminating enemy propaganda, eliminating enemy media, the Nazis still didn't have a majority. Now, they formed a coalition with the National Party, another right-wing party, but Hitler's angry, right? He wants to change the constitution. He needs a majority to completely destroy democracy. And this is where the enabling law comes into it, an enabling act. For me, this was the death note for democracy in Germany, and it was signed by the politicians. So it was signed by the politicians. So 24th of March 1933, the enabling act. It was called the Law for Removing the Distress of the People in the Reich. It passed This act would allow Hitler to make laws without consulting the Reichstag and without the approval of the president. Remember those two things if you remember everything, guys. It allows Hitler to pass any law without the Reichstag, without Hindenburg. Again, this is just ruining democracy. This is essentially establishing a dictatorship. 24th of March, less than 2 months after Hitler becomes Chancellor, he's passing this law that basically bypasses any democratic process. This means the members of the Reichstag would in effect be voting to make themselves redundant. Redundant meaning pointless. To pass the act, he needed 2/3 majority. He had already banned communists from the Reichstag, so he stopped communists using their vote against him. He did this with the emergency decree that we saw previously. And the SDP members were threatened by the SA. So the SA actually, and the SS, they lined the hall during the vote. Intimidation. And the SDP members, they either gave in to Nazi pressure or failed to show up. The Enabling Act was passed by 444 votes to 94. Again, look at the Nazi bullying tactics here. Look at that aggression. Look at that intimidation. And then what does he do with it? Well, Communist Party have been dealt with. Social Democrats dealt with. Now, he's going to target law against formation of new parties and trade unions banned. He's going to use the Enabling Act to ban these two things. Basically, because he's got rid of the communists and the Social Democrats, the reason he's doing the July 1933 law against the formation of new parties is to stop them forming into another party. He's just stopping that dead. And the trade unions are a working class communist socialist power base. So by banning them, Hitler's eliminating again his opponents. He's now in position to control Germany's politics, administrative and legal systems. So, going into 1934, he's essentially achieved what he needed to politically. He's made Germany essentially a one-party state, and he was the unrivaled leader of the party. However, well, he now needs to make sure, because there was one man who could potentially challenge him. This was Ernst Röhm. Now, Ernst Röhm, he led the SA, the brown shirts, and he was a threat, or Hitler believed he was, because Röhm was, he'd merged an army veteran group with the SA, bringing the number to 3 million. So Röhm was backed by quite a lot of troops, and that to Hitler was a threat, because those troops were loyal to Röhm, not to Hitler. Now, the SA members were showing discontent with Hitler and believed he didn't really value them. And 1933, a lot of these SA members were unemployed, and they idolized Röhm. So Röhm, if he wanted to, could challenge Hitler. Now, Röhm wanted Hitler to go more nationalist, more right-wing. He didn't like that Hitler was friends with the industrialists, the financiers, the moneymakers, and he wanted more of a socialist kind of aspect to it, basically helping the working class and taking money off the rich. Now, in the name of German unity, Hitler had suppressed Jews, communists, liberals, Catholics, Freemasons and Christians. Now a purge of the Nazi left wing was going to take place, and that their target was Röhm and the SA. In June 1934, Hitler consolidated his power by purging them. Purging means destroying them. The SA had been hired thugs of Nazi party since the early days. Remember, guys, when you're learning about this, the SA were the ones who were marching with Hitler in the Munich Putsch. The SA were the ones who were fighting the Communist Party. They were fighting them on the streets. The SA were the ones after the Wall Street crash who beat up the communists at their rallies. They're the ones who stood with the SS and marshalled the Reichstag as the Enabling Act was passed. But they were loyal to Röhm. Now, Himmler, Goering and Goebbels, Hitler's main guys, whispered in his ear, Röhm's going to be a threat. You need to deal with him. Himmler especially, because Himmler is head of the SS and he wants the SA to be destroyed or merged with the SS. Himmler wants to be the sole power of the kind of police force in Germany. So on the night of June 29th to the 30th, 1934, units of the SS arrested key members, including Röhm. They actually targeted and killed 2 other significant leaders as well, not of the SA or the Nazis, but Schleicher, remember the once Chancellor, who believed he could use Hitler as a puppet, and Gregor Strasser. Now, Strasser was in the Bamberg Conference. So you go back to 1926, if you look back at your revision notes from the Nazi Party when they're in these wilderness years, the Bamberg Conference, Strasser was this rival leader of Hitler's in the north who was more left-wing. And Hitler managed to subdue that left-wing side at the Bamberg Conference to make the Nazis more right-wing. But this was a time when he was going to get rid of Strasser once and for all. So Hitler uses it to purge the SA, and the SA are going to be merged into the SS, and this is the Night of the Long Knives. So again, just a recap. You can pause and read that if you wish. So the motto, all opposition must be stamped to the ground. They beat up opposition, people who disagreed with Hitler and the Nazi ideas, especially communists. So again, cause, events, consequence, great way to kind of remember this. Undisciplined and not respectable. Rome, socialist views, Rome wanting control of the German army. They're the cause. And the events, well, 30th of June, SA leaders arrested and shot, including Rome. I don't know why there's an E in there. Apologise, it's ROHM. He accused the SA of plotting to seize power, and as a result, Hitler gets rid of the threat of the SA. Hitler's removing other opponents as well, and Hitler's kind of claiming to the people, look at me, I'm removing these thugs, I'm removing these enemies of the state. So, let's have a look to finalise this transition from democracy to dictatorship. The oath of allegiance and the Führer. Look at the differences. So, I'm kind of skipping ahead. I think the next slide was meant to be this slide. But Hindenburg dies, and this is the allegiance of the army. The oath of allegiance would normally be this. So when a new president comes in, the army would say, I swear by Almighty God this sacred oath. I will at times loyally and honestly serve my people and country, and as a brave soldier I will be ready at any time to stake my life for this oath. And then this is the Führer's oath. Which really, because my face seems to be blocking the info, the Führer's oath swears directly to Adolf Hitler. So the first one swears it to the state and the people in the country. The Führer oath swears it to Hitler personally. Okay, see the subtle difference. Point being here, though, is the army now swears an oath to Hitler. Hindenburg's dead, and that's kind of all she wrote for democracy. So Hindenburg dies 2nd of August. Hitler's now declares himself Germany's Führer, basically adding all the president's powers to him as the chancellor, forces the oath of loyalty, and Hitler is now a dictator. And that is the rise of dictatorship in a nutshell. So make sure you revise it.